Today, we are diving into the absolutely wild story of how the entire music industry got turned completely upside down, and not by a rival company, but by this perfect storm of genius, greed, and a factory worker nobody saw coming.
You know, it sounds like the setup to a bad joke, right? But this is the real-life riddle at the very heart of this story. We've got three people from totally different worlds who somehow became the accidental architects of a revolution that changed music forever. They were on a collision course, and none of them had a clue.
All right, so let's meet the main players. To really get how this all went down, you have to understand they were basically living in three separate universes.
First, there's the scientist, Karlheinz Brandenburg, this brilliant German guy who was just obsessed with compressing sound. Then you have the mogul, Doug Morris, an absolute king of the music biz, but completely blind to what was coming. And finally, the pirate, Del Glover, a blue-collar worker who was the ultimate insider, the inventor, the kingpin, and the unlikely revolutionary.
Okay, let's dig into how this all got started. It begins with two men who really should have been partners, but instead they ended up on completely opposite sides of history, the scientist and the suit.
So the scientist's secret weapon was this incredible field called psychoacoustics. The idea itself is kind of simple, but it's pure genius. Basically, if the human ear can't even perceive certain sounds in a song, why bother keeping them in the file? This let Brandenburg's team shrink music files down to a tiny fraction of their size, and you could barely tell the difference. This was the magic trick that made the MP3 possible.
And here is where you can see the huge disconnect. While Brandenburg was literally inventing the future of music, Doug Morris was busy making record-breaking profits selling CDs. I mean, to him, the CD was the perfect product. Great margins, total control. Digital files, they just seemed cheap, easy to steal, and a huge threat to his business. So when Brandenburg came knocking with his incredible invention, they just blew him off. They were way too busy counting their CD money to see the future staring them in the face.
So what do you do when the very industry you're trying to help slams the door in your face? Well, Brandenburg's team did something radical. They put their MP3 software on the internet for anyone to download and use. They basically just gave away the keys to the digital kingdom for free.
So while that digital tea was quietly spreading across the internet, a totally different kind of threat was brewing in the most unlikely place you can imagine, inside the walls of the music industry itself. See, the digital revolution needed something to share, and it was about to get a direct supply from the source.
And this brings us to our third guy, Del Glover. Now, he wasn't a tech visionary or a powerful CEO. He was just a smart, regular guy working on the factory floor. And not just any factory, the one pressing the CDs for Doug Morris's company, Universal Music. He was the ultimate insider.
And his method was, well, it was shockingly simple. He'd be on the factory line with the biggest albums of the year. We're talking Eminem, Jay-Z, weeks before they were supposed to come out. He'd just slip a disc behind his big belt buckle, give a friendly nod to the security guards, and walk right out the front door. Then he'd go home, use Brandenburg's free software to rip the album into MP3s and upload it to this elite pirate group.
And listen to this, he wasn't just a one-hit wonder. Over the years, Del Glover leaked nearly 2,000 albums. He became the single biggest source of pirated music in history, all from a small town in North Carolina.
And this is where it all comes together. The scientists rejected technology, the factory workers smuggled goods, and the music mogul's empire, all of it smashing together in a perfect storm that was about to tear the whole industry apart. Just think about this chain of events for a second. The physical CDs were being manufactured in Doug Morris's own factory. They were then being stolen by his own employee, Del Glover. Glover then used Karlheinz Brandenburg's free MP3 software to turn that physical music into digital files and unleash them online, which fueled a global piracy explosion. It was the perfect weapon.
You honestly can't make this stuff up. The irony is just, it's unbelievable. The music mogul's fortress, his own factory, became the source of his downfall. The scientist who got ignored by the industry, he ended up getting rich from all the MP3 players that piracy made so popular. And the factory worker? He helped bring a multi-billion-dollar global industry to its knees with a belt buckle. So the whole industry was just in a total nosedive. CD sales were falling off a cliff, and it was only a matter of time before the feds came looking for whoever it was that lit the match. The FBI launched this massive global investigation called Operation Fastlink, and after years of chasing these digital shadows all over the world, they finally managed to trace the single biggest source of leaks back to one man,
Del Glover. And in 2007, they showed up at his house.
So when all the dust finally settled, the lives of our three guys were changed forever. Doug Morris, the king of the CD, saw his empire crumble and was forced to adapt to this new world of streaming. Karlheinz Brandenburg, the scientist nobody listened to, became a multimillionaire from MP3 licensing, and Del Glover, the factory worker, he went to prison.
But this story is so much bigger than just three people. It's really about the end of an entire era. That CD factory in Kings Mountain, the place where it all began, eventually shut down for good. The age of physical media was over. And from those ashes, the world of streaming as we know it today was born. So, in the end, it leaves you with this one huge question, doesn't it? When technology makes everything so easy to copy and share, who's the revolutionary and who's the criminal? Is it the scientist who made the weapon, the worker who pulled the trigger, or the mogul who accidentally loaded the gun? It really blurs the lines, and it's a question we're still wrestling with today.